Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Phil Guerin. I'm a technical account manager here with Cavello, and I'm here to talk to you today a little bit about effective data migration. Yay. No, jokes aside, we all have to do this. Data migrations are an ongoing activity across a lot of different organizations. Cost savings and functional and flow savings by moving from on-prem to the cloud just makes sense. It seems simple in terms of, well, let's just copy my data from my on-prem instances and paste it into my cloud services. And if it was that easy, there wouldn't be an entire industry built around facilitating these data migrations in the first place and charge you a pretty penny to do so. So what we're here to do is talk a little bit about how to be effective in terms of the things you want to do leading up to a data migration, as well as the things you want to consider during a data migration, which I feel like a lot of that gets missed. And then what are the things you want to focus on post-migration, right? A lot of the migrations that we've seen and how people work through, a lot of the focus is on the post-migration, and there's very little to no focus on the pre or the during migration. And we're here today to just talk about some of those challenges and talk about how measuring your data and how the Cavello platform can help you do that. You can see way too many images of my face. So again, I'm Phil, I'm a TAM here. So data, and I like this side, the data problem. Everything produces data. We demand more and more data every week, every year, because we're becoming more and more data driven in our decisions, which is a good thing. The issue with that is we demand data and metrics and KPIs and insights from everything that we're working with and everyone that we're working with, which means data has just exploded. Right, the number of systems that are producing data, the volume of data that these systems are producing, the types of data that these systems are producing, and the fact that we're not all running on a server or a small cluster on-prem in our own basements anymore. We're running on a distributed workforce. We're running on multiple data centers. We're running on physical, virtual. We're running on multiple cloud hosting environments. Our data is everywhere. It's exponentially growing. And it's frankly just a challenge and a problem when it comes to managing the day-to-day, especially when you think about data getting caught up in a breach. Right? I say this all the time. If I lose a server due to a compromise and I've got a solid backup and restore process, great. It's going to happen. As long as I can get that team back up and running in a few hours, communicate out who I need to, I'm good. If I don't understand the data that was stolen, I'm not good. Right? That's going to be a 3, 6, 8, 18-month conversation to understand what was there and how it's going to be used against me. So just like in general, I definitely want to understand the data under focus if I'm going to be moving a lot of it. Right? Once I start moving it, it's going to be more under threat and more under risk than if it's just sitting in place. So it's probably the best time to take the opportunity to really understand your data, understand your access model, and do that as a part of your data migration. Right, so this is on the before side. Right, we're going to migrate the data. Now, there's the very unmeasured way to do it, where, well, I've got an HR server, I've got a finance server, I've got an engineering server. I'm just going to copy all that stuff into SharePoint drives with the same names. Okay, so you've just taken whatever problems that you have on-prem and you've moved all of those problems into your cloud service. Right now, what I mean by that is, are you taking copies of things into consideration? Are you taking who has access to things in consideration? Are you considering who's actually working with the files and the data into consideration? And I call that point out specifically because there's who should have access logically, and there is who does have access physically. Meaning if I just take all my finance data and lift and shift it, the unmeasured expectation is, well, when I go set up the access rules in my SharePoint, I'll just make sure that the finance team has access to it and everything is good. Except for the fact there's going to be some percentage of your C-suite and many other people in the organization who aren't registered as finance level employees in like your identity system that are using this data. And as soon as you cut ties from an access perspective, you just disrupted the day-to-day to potentially very, very high cost resources. So just lifting and shifting your data is a very kind of blind exercise. At a minimum, you need to understand the access. You need to understand the duplicates. right? So I'm talking about cost savings at the end of the day. If you're disrupting high cost resources, you're costing the business money. Every byte that you move from on-prem into a cloud service is costing the business money, right? So another opportunity beyond the access is really just understanding, do I need to move all of this data into the cloud in the first place, right? Anything running on-prem, you're just stacking data and stacking data and stacking data. Again, this is the best opportunity to pare that down. And now you're only paying and you're only doing the work and the investigation and the analysis on the data that the organization actually needs. And you have got eyes on it throughout that process. It sounds a lot better than just kind of copying and pasting it and then kind of kicking those problems down the road. Right, the second point in here too. While the data migration is happening, what a lot of people seem to fail to realize is that people still need to do their jobs, right? And this is beyond just the people outside of the department may or may not have access. A lot of people don't even really think about this. Like, there's no downtime during a data migration. People still need to be doing their work and they need to be able to execute through that. So even having the measured study of what is all of my data, who has access to it, who's working with it. If I don't understand that going in, I'm kind of just making gut decisions. Why not use the data? Right, so a little bit of a recap, but that measure before you move, the clean up after yourself, sorry, is the super important part. So we've actually seen this. I've seen this personally eyes on with one of the financial institutions that we work with. They had recently gone through a data migration exercise before they deployed the Cabello platform. We deployed, and very quickly, we noticed a duplicate copy of a very large chunk of data. There was an on-prem replication node, one of their servers, and there was one of their SharePoint drives. And it was 98, 97, it's almost a duplicate copy of the same information. Now, when I first looked at it, I thought it was an issue with the reporting because that seemed unlikely. When their sysadmin first put eyes on it, it took him about 30 seconds to realize what happened, and his heart sank. They didn't even know that that server was still in commission, right? So they had a third-party organization come in. They did the upfront measurements. They facilitated the migration into the cloud, and they facilitated the teardown and the cleanup of all the on-premise nodes that were needed as a transitionary mechanic to get things into the cloud in the first place. Now, they had signed documents from their vendor that that vendor cleaned up all the on-prem instances. They didn't. They missed one. Right? They missed one. They didn't even know that that drive was sitting on that server. They had no idea that they had a completely duplicate copy to a bunch of sensitive data that they were storing in a very well-protected SharePoint drive. Now it's sitting on a drive on a server where they don't expect any sensitive data to be, which means it's not in line with their cybersecurity focus. They don't know it's there, so they're not even trying to protect that system the same way that they're trying to protect the other systems where they understand the data. So again, right, to me at a glance, it looked suspicious. To someone who understands the data in the site, it was an immediate awareness of the fact that we just didn't clean up after ourselves. And that creates a very distinct risk to exposing the data when I don't know where it is. And then again, I can't stress enough around maintaining effective access permissions. It's not going to be a nice, neat little story in terms of understanding, like looking at data at a pass and being able to kind of gut check who needs access to it within the organization. It's always piecemeal. There's always special rules. There's always special considerations. A lot of these special rules and considerations may actually go against other policies that you have internally. And this is just a pill to swallow and something to reconcile, because you can either hit the hammer hard and say no more violations, any policies, but that is certainly going to lead to day-to-day disruption, which is cost loss, right? So all of this, when it comes to security and usability, there's no perfect. It's a line that we have to walk. Let's make it a balance sheet conversation. What can we take risks on? What can we not? What can we tolerate in terms of operational disruptions? What can we not? You need to measure the environment in order to make these considerations. So it's not hard, right? All I'm really suggesting to do here is start by discovering your data. Right, so do you have only finance data on your finance server? Or has there been replication instances and have been people moving things around and taking copies of things and storing things temporarily in the systems that they have access to because they're trying to back things up and make copies, just doing their jobs in any way that they can kind of creatively find, which is an interesting problem of the human being level. So just measure your data, understand where it is. Now you need to understand the sensitivity. You want to get rid of duplication. Again, every byte that you move up into the cloud service is going to cost you, and you need to understand those permissions in order to make that migration effective, right? A solid, successful data migration means that most of your staff doesn't even know that it happened in the first place because they've maintained access to their on-prem instances. You're staging all of the replication up into your service in another part of your infrastructure. That's why you need to measure to make sure you're cleaning up after yourself, because you're not going from the raw source into the final source. There's a transitionary path that you're going to take, and then it's going to end up in your cloud service. And the way that you configure storage, the way that you configure your access permissions is almost certainly going to be different from that on-prem system that you're starting with to the cloud service that you're landing on. So if you're measuring up front where you're starting, you're measuring that transition period or that staging area, and you're measuring where everything is landing, you're actually watching the data flow as you go, and you can put multiple eyes on this other than just the technicians moving the data through. You can understand the permissions where they're starting. You can make sure that you're having the conversation so that data lands solid from a permissions and an access perspective once it lands. And then again, we're cleaning up after ourselves after that activity is done. So all that sensitivity is no longer on-prem. It's where we expect it to be. And now our cybersecurity and our protection focuses are strong because we have the evidence to prove that we're not missing anything. So measure your data. I'm going to pause here for a second, and I'm just going to look at the chat here for some of my mods who are helping me out. If there's any questions here so far or any point you'd like me to dive into deeper, feel free to kind of turn the conversation a little bit. I'd appreciate if we can keep it migration focused where possible. If not, I will do a quick little demonstration of the Cabello platform just so you can see it. And I'll just reiterate a couple of these points in terms of how Cabello can help in terms of measuring your data, understanding that cleanup effort, and understanding that permissions model when it lands. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions come in. That's okay. I want to encourage everyone on the call right now, please be encouraged to check out cabello.com. We've got a lot of resources there. This session, as well as previous sessions, will be available, as well as many other resources. And please reach out as well. Reach out directly. Reach out through our inbound connections. Request a demo. I'm happy to have a one-on-one conversation, do a one-on-one demo with you, and really dial in where Cabello can help support these many initiatives. Out here. So bringing in Cabello. We go out of our way to make this very simple for you to do. So Cabello as a platform offers what I'll argue is the simplest deployment model on the market. We cover your various cloud services, all of your on-prem and virtual infrastructure, right down to all of your endpoints, including your laptops and your desktops. So MacBooks, Windows desktops, Linux servers, any combination of all of these things, that's great. Where are you storing your data in cloud services like Office 365, SharePoint, Box.com, Google Workspace, etc.? We measure all of that inventory, whether it's sensitive or not, and we crawl through all the types in all of those data collections looking for sensitive data, right? We're focused on the PII data, we're focused on PCI data, we're focused on PHI data. You get to do your own keyword questions to that inventory. So think about grouping things together around special projects or things that you know should only live in certain places. You want to be able to provide the evidence that you understand the scope of where some of the references to special project X have managed to make their way through the infrastructure. And we do this with everything with text in it. So it can be an image or a scan document. It can be a complicated file type. It can be a zip file with a bunch of different components in it. That's fine. If there's text in it, we can identify it, even if it's a picture or an image. And we pull all these different types out of it. So we know what your data is, we know where it is, we know how sensitive it is, and better yet, we know who has access to it. And again, this covers your on-prem, this covers your various cloud services, so it gives you that ability to measure your solution where you're starting. It gives you the ability to manage any on-prem nodes or any cloud nodes that you're using as a transition or a transitory path for that migration, as well as the cloud services that you're going to land on at the end of the day. We look at the permissions on all of those. So we don't just understand the data, we understand the permissions. And when I got into look for special case permissions, right? This is where we get into the access audit. So beyond just who has access to the data, and when you're looking at your access models, over time, people just add rules. It's less common for people to go in and prune things out. So over time, more and more people are just getting access to things that they don't need, which can give you a false sense of security when you want to pare that down. Now, when you want to pare down your access model, you really want to understand who's actually working with the data. And one option is to just walk around for a while and ask a bunch of people and try to get a gut feel, make a decision, and ask for forgiveness later, or look at the data, right? This is a very simple thing to measure. It's a very simple question to answer. So why not just take the time and understand, well, who has access to all that finance data on the finance server? Is it only the finance team, or do other people have access to it? And the people that, arguably shouldn't, are they using the data? And if they're using the data, that's going to be a big operational hit that you want to avoid, or you at least want to have the conversation up front. Again, this is the best time to be able to catalog your data, understand the sensitivity, and really drill in on the access model, get rid of duplication, and really just engage in a big data hygiene activity while you're doing the data migration. And now you're just head and shoulders in a brand new world when you're sitting with all that data in your cloud service at the end of the day. One thing I should mention here as well, so we're not just a data discovery and a classification solution. We also focus on data protection, right? So while this data migration is going on and while a lot of data is moving, this is a very disruptive activity in and of itself, right? If I got all of my valuables in my home locked up tight, all my doors are locked, all my windows are locked, it's hard to go get them, right? If I'm moving everything and I got it sitting on my front lawn and I got it sitting in my driveway and I got half of it sitting in a moving truck and the doors are wide open, that's my valuables in motion, right? That's my data not at rest, that's my data in motion, and it's a lot easier for people to go get it while it's in motion. So what Cabello also helps with here is understanding the risk of exposure to the data that we're looking at. Regardless of the reason, where is it exposed because of unpatched vulnerabilities? Where is it exposed because of weak configuration rules? And do I need to do anything about that ahead of time? Do I need to focus on that during migration? Do I need to clean any of that stuff up after my migration is done? Right? Don't do it just because you're afraid of it, right? Run the scans, understand the data, have the conversations, and make it a balance sheet conversation. Don't let fear and uncertainty drive your data privacy and your data protection. Let your measurements do it, right? And then if anyone questions the decision, they question the strategy, this isn't a gut conversation or a steamroller based on collective experience. This is just data. Like an old terrible joke that I like is, if we're making decisions based on opinions, great, let's use my opinion. If we're making decisions based on data, well, let's use the best available data that I have and let's bring good minds together to discuss it. I'd much rather live in that other world. So this is how we bring all of this together, right? I'm just going to reiterate this. You're moving data from on-prem through unknown systems to final cloud sources. You want to measure up front. You want to understand the data, dedupe it, understand the sensitivity, understand the access rules, even when you're moving that through the transitionary nodes, and especially when you're landing on the cloud service itself. And then as a follow-up, you want to be able to make sure you understand for your own confidence that all of the cleanup has happened, all the right access permissions has made its way over through the migration, and there's nothing in there that's going to cause an ongoing concern from a data privacy or data protection perspective. And you want to have the data and the reports and the measurements to prove it. Right, if I have the data and the reports to prove it, I just save myself potentially 1 to 3 different meetings with a varying degree of different folks who are going to have those fears and going to have those reservations. And what they want is the confidence from the team that they can go home and go to bed and go to sleep effectively. You give them the data, you speak to it comfortably, you're going to walk through those meetings. So this is what Cabello focuses on. There's a lot more that we dig into, but I'm kind of just trying to keep this restricted to a data migration conversation because that's what we're going to talk about. So again, I will look to the chat to make sure that there's no other questions in here. I'm not seeing anything come through. So again, I'm just going to reiterate, thank you all again for joining the call. If you have any questions, you want to dive into this a little bit more, reach out directly. And actually, let me pull my contact information back up here. reach out directly, come to our site, discuss there, check out the resources, and let's have a conversation. If we can help you with data migration, if we can help you with data retention, if we can help you with your cybersecurity insurance, any regulatory movements that you're trying to make, understanding your data is simply a critical component to anything in the data privacy and the data protection space. We're well beyond the point of just scanning for vulnerabilities and patching them best. We need to understand where our data lives. We need to understand the sensitivity. We need to understand who has access to it. We still have to do the rest, right? Security is a stack, and every few years there is a new layer to that stack, and we are all beholden to it. And the more we ignore it and the longer that we wait, the larger that problem grows. And the larger it grows over time, the harder it is to accomplish. And then people just give up, right? But once you give up on discovering your data and protecting it, that's just a time until an event happens, which is going to put the lights out on the business in the first place. So again, this is a balance sheet conversation. If I want to keep running my business, I need to protect my data. To protect my data, I need to measure it. I need to understand who has access to it. I need to understand where it's at risk. So again, thank you again very much. My little long-winded outro there, but check out cavello.com. Thank you again, and come back next month for some more content. Thanks, everyone.